Canada declares China's actions against Uyghurs is genocide. Canada's House of Commons voted unanimously to affirm that China's actions towards its ethnic minority of Uyghurs amounts to genocide. Justin Trudeau and Liberal members of his cabinet did not attend the vote on Monday. By declaring China's re-education camps as part of an ongoing campaign of genocide, Canada joins the United States as the second nation to stand up to China's gross violations of human rights. The motion, which was supported from the majority Conservative Party and a few Liberal lawmakers, passed 266-0. Parliament's move puts pressure on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's minority Liberal governing party to do the same.
Wait, so United States was first, and
Yes.
then Canada.
Canada.
And then Canada second. But United States did this under Trump administration, correct?
On its last day.
On its last day.
Via the State Department.
But the Biden administration agreed with it.
Yes.
And now Canada is following, because Canada was pressured to follow United States, and it worked. This could be the best thing that the Trump administration is responsible for. If the domino effect keeps, as people who are very anti-Trump here, we try not to be dogmatic about our views and acknowledge when something. And again, given that when that happened, when the last day, all those announcements about international politics and the other stuff that Pompeo mentioned, most of them was very destructive and really hurtful to human rights around the world. I'm not going to claim that this whole declaring this genocide by Pompeo was something that was with good intentions, but I don't care. I'll take it. This might have been the Trump administration that is now responsible for more people declaring this a genocide, and that might be a good thing that came out of the Trump administration. And I'm glad that, unlike Trump, who wanted to do everything the opposite of Obama, like, oh, Obama did this, I'll do the opposite. The Biden administration doesn't seem to be that, like, oh yeah, we agree with this, and they're not going to go do everything the opposite just because Trump did it, right? So the Biden administration is mature enough to be like, yeah, we actually agree. We're going to keep calling it a genocide. Well, they did undo some things, but not this one, because this made sense to them, right? So this is really good. I do also, before you guys talk, I just want to mention, I do realize that some people are going to be picky about definitions of genocide and all, and be like, well, technically this is cultural genocide, not genocide. Well, some people are like, it is genocide because they did this. They forced women to, I don't know the detail, to sterilization and stuff like that. So here's the thing. None of us here are like international legal experts. So I don't think like we have the expertise to recognize whether something is just a cultural genocide or genocide. But to me, I, as a utilitarian and not as a legal expert, I care about what it takes for more international push against human suffering or human misery, right? So I know for some reasons, some good reasons and some bad reasons, if something is marked as a genocide, it gets pushed back against by the international community a lot more, and it makes it even difficult for private organizations to work with a country that is involved in genocide if this does get labeled as a genocide. So I don't really, as a utilitarian, if something is causing people harm and misery, whether it's genocide or not genocide, I only care about the level of harm and misery, not the technical legal definitions of what's a genocide, right? But so for a practical reason, even if you disagree with me that this is not legally can be defined as a genocide, for practical reasons, I hope that it does fit the definition of a genocide so that we see a more international pushback against it. Go on, Susanna.
Well, yes, it does legally meet at least one of the, there's multiple multiple criteria, I believe at least 5, but the one that jumps to mind is the that does meet the standard of a genocide, full stop, not cultural genocide, is the manufacturing of demographic engineering, manufacturing of birth rates, which we have seen evidenced by documentation from the CCP itself, okay, their own documentation, mass sterilization. Genocide doesn't have to be just mass shooting people.
It's not always Auschwitz.
Exactly. It is.
I wasn't suggesting that that's only genocide.
I'm not speaking to you. I'm speaking to other people who have a very specific thing in mind. They think it means, taking people who are already alive and just shooting them down or something, or concentration camp. I mean, there are those in China, in Xinjiang, but genocide is also destroying the next generation. Genocide is also trying to erase future generations of an ethnic group. Okay, so under those criteria, with the mass sterilization campaigns that we're seeing, as evidenced by documentation from the Chinese government itself, yes, this certainly meets that legal criteria. You had something else to say?
Yeah, well, Rivka first.
So, I agree with you, Armin, that when something gets labeled a genocide, it definitely becomes a black mark, so to speak, on a country's behavior. And so it's important that more people hopefully will follow suit. As far as like the comment you made about Trump, yeah, it's a great thing. And it bothers me so much that there are people that are not willing to acknowledge that this was a good and needed gesture because he did it as Trump, because Trump did it. Not the gesture, but who did it, you know? And so if you really care about people and suffering and discrimination and human rights, this is a good thing, you know? He also signed a federal animal cruelty law. You know what? That's a good thing. It was a mishmash. So just because he did it as Trump doesn't negate the fact that this was a good thing to have done. And yeah, and so your point about definition of genocide, you know, it does meet some of those, you know, and they do have a list of it. And if the State Department of the United States and the Canadian government, who are very well aware of what the international criteria for genocide is, are calling it a genocide, then, you know, yes, you know, because so some of the international convention on this talk about killing members of the group, causing bodily or mental harm, deliberately inflicting conditions of life to cause, you know, destruction, whether that's, you know, physiological, like starving them out, or whether it's actual physical violence, imposing measures intended to prevent births, which is exactly what Susanna was talking about, and forcefully transferring children of one group to another. So they take, you know, if you take Uyghur children and you give them to a Han family, or those sort of things. So yeah, those do meet a lot of the conditions. And you know what, another thing may not meet the conditions of genocide, but it's a way that people use to wipe out culture, is preventing them from speaking their language.
That is happening within the Chinese reeducation.
That is a huge, huge thing. Preventing them or making speaking of their language illegal. So if they have a cultural tradition that is expressed through language, and part of their language and how they talk about themselves, by forcing the language to go away, you do take away part of this particular culture or group, or even their ability to talk about things in their own way. And then obviously not preventing them from, you know, their religion, or even gathering. And that's another thing, you know, not allowing one or more than 2 or 3 of any particular group at one time all of those things. But the language thing is very important, and I don't think people realize the extent to which it decimates particular cultures.
Yeah, and I mean it's really brutal because I mean they criminalize things that are part of their culture, and they will have people in re-education camps, and then they have to retroactively choose their own offenses, which are often things like not smoking, not eating pork, praying. Moms are particularly criminalized and go to higher levels or higher security areas of re-education camps where it's a lot less likely that they'll ever be released. However, I do want to highlight a few things. So 12 days ago, Canada became the second country to recognize the repression of the Uyghurs and other Turkic minorities as genocide. On Thursday, well, wait, no, that was last Thursday. So 3 days later, 3 days after Canada voted, is when the Netherlands became the third to recognize this is genocide after a vote in its parliament. So we now have at least 3 on the books. And I wanted to talk about the Netherlands now because we might as well talk about it now. I don't think we want to cover it again. But this is some interesting commentary in the National Review by Jimmy Quinn. Saying perhaps the political support of those votes would have been there without the Trump administration's 11th hour designation of Beijing's anti-Uyghur campaign as genocide in January. But it's increasingly clear that that decision, reportedly made by then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo over the objections of the career officials on his legal team, and later endorsed by his successor, Antony Blinken, has made all the difference in spurring more international action. At least that's what Sjoerd Sjoerdsma, the Dutch member of parliament who authored the resolution that passed on Thursday, told National Review. His party had been following the developments out of China's western Xinjiang region for months and proposed legislation to call for various sanctions on those responsible. Quote, when the US and Canada moved, it made sense to follow suit.
So that's exactly Armin's point, that you have one country, very powerful country, then another one, so then it becomes something that other countries feel that, yes, they do need to follow suit. And I think that's exactly what Armin was saying. And as soon as you said that, I'm like, see, it's happening already,
Go ahead.
All right, so just a few things. I saw on the Facebook some people were commenting like, "Oh my God, that will show them." Like, "Oh yeah, you labeled as genocide. That's that's like nothing. Like you're not taking any actions against them."
Oh my God,
they're idiots. Obviously, this is gonna have a huge impact. Is it enough impact? No. But is it huge? Is it significant? Yeah. This is why they are desperately trying to fight. The Chinese government, the CCP is desperately trying to fight this. This is a really good. This is like encourages a lot more countries to consider genocide. And if a country's government is recognizing this as genocide, it's going to really mobilize a lot of pressures on the same governments to reconsider their ties to China or move a lot of these manufacturing jobs to countries like Vietnam or find other alternatives. Even this is going to hit them, where it matters, right? Again, I'm not saying Chinese economy is not going to grow. It's still going to grow. It's going to grow really fast. Assume, probably. But this is the difference is going to matter to them, right? This is like hitting them at their wallet, and this is going to also countries like Canada and United States, they can't get their companies to not work with China, right? Like, for example, companies like Disney, Nike, these will continue making their products in China, Prada, and there's nothing that the government can force them to do other than this, actually, because my understanding is that when this is actually being marked, and I'm really glad that it's not just the Trump administration, because it's easy to ignore what the Trump administration was doing by a lot of these giant private companies. But now that it's not just Trump, but it's also Biden and now Canada and some Netherlands, it's going to be very, very more difficult. It's going to be a lot more difficult for giant corporations to justify and move forward. Like this is something that you don't want to touch. Working with a government that is actively right now involved in genocide, like it's going to put a lot of pressure on big companies that to China could matter more than the government itself. You know what I mean? Because the trades that are happening a lot of time between United States and China, a lot of times for a free country like United States, happens independently from the government itself. But when you do this, now you're actually could actually put a lot of pressure for a lot of these agreements and trades and deals not to go through. Susanna, you want to say something?
Yeah, there's something I wanted to highlight really quickly. Again, from this analysis from the National Review, if we are to take a lesson from last week's votes, what stands out is that their condemnation of the CCP's atrocity cut broadly across ideological lines in both Ottawa and The Hague. Political forces in the opposition made it a point to highlight their government's failures to hold China to account. And this is what I really wanted to highlight with Canada. Quote, "It is shameful that Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party refuse to call the horrific conduct by the Chinese Communist Party what it is, a genocide," said Erin O'Toole, the leader of Canada's Conservative Party, during a news conference following the Canadian vote. Let me highlight once again, Trudeau and most of his government declined to show up for that vote.
You know, I don't know if this is justified or not, because I need to look into the detail, because when Trudeau was pressed, he was like, listen, we were doing the research. I mean, I know it's like, it might be easy for us to decide, well, this is obviously genocide, but you have to do maybe he's, there's so many things about Trudeau that I don't like, but I don't know if this is justified or not, right? We don't know. Like, at the end of the day, Canada came out and called this genocide just because it took them a while. And Trudeau wasn't saying that this is not genocide. Trudeau, when he was like, listen, we're like, we want to make sure that the word genocide is not used loosely just because we are being emotionally driven by a Trump administration that had other political problems with China, right? We want to make sure that the word genocide has the effect that it needs to affect for future accusations of genocide. And that's why, yes, we want to do our due diligence before we call this genocide. And again, for us here sitting on, just like, well, the reports show that they did it, and this is the definition of genocide, so call it genocide already. Yeah, I mean, again, maybe it was that. Maybe I'm not saying they should have already known this, right? This should have been maybe labeled 5 years ago, 10 years ago. They should have already maybe called this genocide. Maybe you're right? But maybe no. Maybe like when they were pushed to call this a genocide, maybe it would. We don't know how these things work, and it's good that they did their due diligence, right? Or maybe you know something more than I do, and you realize that no, there was no justification for the delay. I'm just saying, don't assume that whether what they did was right or wrong just because you're like anti-liberal or pro-Trudeau or anti-Trudeau, like, but anyways, you guys want to say, I have one more thing to say, but you guys want to say something?
I have a couple things to say. So with regard to the Trudeau thing, since that's what we just talked about, I think it's cowardly. I think he's refusing to take a position one way or another. That's why he's abstaining and didn't show up for the vote. That way you can not be against it and not be for it. And that's a way out for a lot of politicians to not take a position on something.
Is it not possible that they needed more time?
Yes, very much so. It could be the possibility, but I know that this is a technique. So if you come forward and say, you know what, I don't know. Part of me thinks that maybe we need to do more research, but then also part of me thinks that maybe, yes, it meets the definition. To me, that seems more honest, and saying, I'm sorry, I don't know what to do. I'm not sure if I can vote, to publicly go there and abstain versus not showing up. I don't know. I think it's cowardly. But then the second thing that I wanted to talk about, and I think he's shown himself to be a coward in other respects as well, in terms of, what happened in France and free speech and refusing to defend Enlightenment values. But that's something else. But then I wanted to talk about Armin's point about companies. I think that is very, very important, because they are very responsive to what the public thinks about them and their PR and their reputation in a lot of ways. And you saw that, for example, in the Me Too, when the Me Too thing happened, all of a sudden, all these companies had statements about, their policies on sexual harassment, and now with a lot of the racial justice initiatives, you have like a company that, makes tech, makes something really insignificant like plastic containers, is putting out a statement on how the company responds, racial equity and things like that. So if it becomes, very costly in terms of reputation to not address this, then I think that people will, you may hopefully start seeing statements like, our sneakers are $5 more because we refuse to, have factories that are staffed by, people that are, forced labor or genocide. We're not going to deal with a country that commits genocide, so that's why we're asking you to pay $5 more. There's so many people that would be down with that. And, and I think you see it all the time. So, or at least it would look good for the company to make some of these, concessions. And I think that, country after country after country following suit is helpful that way, particularly if they're being China's being pressured by these multinational companies.
Okay, I need two more things I want to say. One, I want to respond to this claim by Muggerhead Atheist, saying China is already desperate, very dangerous. They have a lot of WMDs. That is so untrue. China's economy is growing fast, even during the COVID, where a lot of economies shrunk. China's economy, even though it was ground zero of COVID, and it hit them more than many other countries, their economy continued to grow while everything being shut down and everything being closed. China's economy kept on growing there was no COVID happening at all, and it grew faster than a lot of people even anticipated. Even the people that were optimistic about China's economic growth during COVID, it grew faster than even the optimists assumed that it would grow. It was growing. So I don't know what you're talking about. Also, the idea of China having WMDs, the fact that you think that they were going to use it, it also shows that you don't really understand how anything international politics works. I think a lot of people don't understand how much interconnected China's economy is to United States and Europe and everywhere else. As much as governments want to pretend like they're against each other, they are very much on the same side. China is on United States side, economy side. China want. I hope a lot of people understand that China wants U.S. economies to grow. I hope you guys understand. China really wants Americans to make more money. If you think China is against Americans, their economy grows if U.S. economy grows, and United States wants China to have more and more manufacturing hub, because that's also great for U.S. economy. So this whole there's politics that is happening for everyone's watching, and people are oh my god, India is India and being against China. These are a lot of this rhetoric is just for show, but overall these countries are so tied to each other. They're not going to go to war with each other. God damn it. That would be shooting, I would say shooting yourself in the foot, but that would be shooting yourself in the heart. Why would it would be against all their interests to ever use these weapons? guys, come on, like just some basic understanding of these things will make you not sound this like stupid. Another thing I want to mention is that Biden. So here's the thing: the difference between action, and rhetoric. Biden recently came out and said some really stupid crap about pushing China, and he kind of said like, well, this is like their culture or some crap like that, and he was sounding like he was excusing genocide, right? Like, Biden would look like he was excusing genocide and being very soft on China. Yet we see when it comes to action, United States is leading the world when it comes to taking action. Again, that doesn't mean that we're not gonna attack Biden for what he said. What he said was so stupid and it deserves criticism. But you also have to acknowledge that right now, Biden administration, as much as they wanted to say like, oh, Biden is going to be like, I don't know, what did it say? Like, they had so many, he's going to be soft on China. He's going to be like, no, like Biden's administration right now is leading the pressure against Chinese genocide on its people, right? Again, I'm not saying they're going to continue to do good. I'm not going to say everything they're going to do. There are going to be many mistakes that they're going to make, and we're going to call them out, just like what he said. It was like so stupid, and it deserves all the criticism it gets. But his administration right now is leading the world against China's genocide. So again, rhetoric could be criticized, but you have to put that in the context of what the actual what the action is being taken place.
Yeah, Armin and I did a really thorough review of Biden's remarks where he says he refers to the China's actions against the Uyghur genocide or ongoing campaign as part of China's different norms, which seems very like cultural relativist, moral relativist. And oh yeah, thank you, Jake. Yeah, Biden called the genocide a different norm. So if you want to go see us really dig into this and dig into other aspects of the Biden administration, because there's been some statements from other members of the administration that really raised the alarms for people fighting this situation. We did a whole stream called "Is Biden Soft on China and the Uyghur Genocide?" So go Google that on the YouTubes.
And also subscribe to our newsletter, because if we get removed from all these platforms, at least we could reach out to you. And guys, by the way, if you subscribe to our newsletter, you get a free copy. Where's your copy, Susanna? Get it. We're doing promotion. You get a free, it's not even promotion, it's free. Okay, so if you subscribe to our newsletter, link in the description, you get a free copy of Why There's No God. Come on, like I'm handing it out for free. Okay, it's a bestseller on Amazon, and you get it for free. So subscribe to our newsletter, and you get a free copy of Why There's No God sent to you. Link in the description.